Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're talking about Ripple. And no, not just about its coin, XRP. We're going to dive deep into their grand plan, because a whole bunch of recent strategic moves suggest their ambition is, well, it's way bigger than we thought. And that's really the big question we're tackling today, isn't it? Is Ripple quietly trying to build the future of finance right under our noses? I mean, a whole series of recent power plays suggests their ambition has just completely exploded. We're talking way beyond simple digital payments. They seem to be aiming for something much, much more foundational.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll look at their recent power plays. Then we'll get into this so-called financial superhighway they're trying to build. We'll also cover how they landed a seat at the big kids table with regulators. Then we have to talk about their absolutely massive trillion-dollar goal. And finally, we'll weigh all that optimism against, reality. Let's jump in.
All right, Section 1, Ripple's 2026 power plays. And this is all about a recent flurry of activity that's really signaling a major strategic shift. I mean, let's just start with what's happening right now. Because in just the last few weeks, Ripple has made 4 huge moves that honestly changed the entire game.
So you've got this new stablecoin, RLUSD, going live on Binance, a huge partnership with Aviva Investors to tokenize real-world assets. Then, a Ripple executive joins a key U.S. regulatory board, and to top it all off, the CEO starts talking about a trillion-dollar company. Now, the key thing to get here is that these are not random updates. No way. This is a coordinated push right into the heart of institutional finance, combining new tech, major partnerships, and a very savvy political game.
Okay, on to our second section, building a financial superhighway. We're going beyond just XRP here and looking at the new tools they're creating for a whole new financial system. So, what's in this new toolkit they're building? Well, it's definitely not just about XRP anymore. Think of it like this. Ripple is building a brand new set of rails for global finance.
First up, their new stablecoin, RLUSD. So that's Ripple's own US dollar-backed stablecoin, and it is now officially active on Binance. And you got to understand, this is huge. It gives their whole ecosystem a stable dollar layer, which is absolutely essential if you want to do serious financial transactions without the crazy volatility you see with other crypto assets.
Next up, we have tokenization, and this is where things get really interesting. So what is it? Well, it's basically the process of converting the rights to a real-world asset. Think about stuff like an investment fund, real estate, art, and turning them into digital tokens that live on a blockchain. So how does that actually work? You start with a real-world asset, like that investment fund we mentioned. Then you convert its value into secure digital tokens right on the Ripple ledger. And then you can trade those tokens instantly and transparently on the blockchain. This isn't some fantasy either. This is exactly how Ripple is positioning itself. They partnered up with Aviva Investors, a massive asset manager, to do exactly this. It's not just a concept. It's happening right now with the big players.
Okay, Section 3, a seat at the table. We're talking about going from a crypto outsider to a regulatory insider. Because this whole thing isn't just about the technology, right? Ripple is also playing the political game, and they're playing it well. They're moving from being on the outside looking in to being right there on the inside. And here's your proof. A Ripple executive, along with one from Coinbase, was just added to the CFTC's Advisory Council. Now, the CFTC, that's the main commodities regulator in the US. This council, it's the group that literally helps write the rules for all digital assets. This is a very big deal.
I mean, just stop and think about the kind of influence this represents. The Ripple exec is one of only a handful of crypto leaders on this 35-member board. This means they're not just sitting back and hoping for good rules. No. They are in the room, actively helping to write them. That's a whole different level of power.
Okay, so you've got the tech, you've got the political influence. Where does all this lead? Well, this brings us to Section 4, the trillion-dollar goal. This is the grand vision, the big picture, laid out by Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse.
But what's really interesting is that before he even outlined this massive goal, he made a point to reassure the original XRP community. He said, quote, "The XRP family comes first." He wanted to make it crystal clear that even with all this crazy expansion, the core asset, XRP, is still a top priority.
So he laid out this path to a $1 trillion valuation. And here's the kicker. It's not really about the day-to-day price of XRP. Now, the growth depends on building out this global financial infrastructure. The focus is on payments, stablecoins, and tokenization services. And XRP, it remains the central strategic priority right in the middle of this huge new ecosystem. It's about becoming the foundational layer for a whole new financial system.
That is an incredibly ambitious vision. But now, we have to ground all this optimism in a bit of reality. So let's talk about optimism versus reality. What are the potential hurdles? What challenges are actually standing in their way?
Okay, so what are the risks? Well, for one, there's some seriously strong competition out there, not just from other blockchains, but from traditional payment systems too. Then, so much of their success depends on getting friendly regulations around the world, which is never a guarantee. And of course, there's always the high volatility of the crypto market itself. And maybe the biggest one? What if all this institutional progress just doesn't connect with the general public? That gap is a real risk.
So if we look ahead, we can kind of map out 3 potential future scenarios. Let's start with the green light, the optimistic one. Ripple becomes the key infrastructure for institutions, and XRP becomes a super relevant bridge asset. Then you have the yellow, the neutral path. Progress continues, but it's more gradual, maybe limited by outside factors. And then the red, the negative scenario. Regulatory problems or just a lack of adoption stalls the whole project's real-world impact.
All right, so that brings us to our final takeaway. What's the bottom line here? How should we really think about this new Ripple of 2026? I think the most important shift to really wrap your head around is this evolution. In the past, the focus was pretty much solely on XRP for payments. The identity was basically a crypto project. But the future? The focus is now on infrastructure for the whole shebang: payments, stablecoins, and tokenized assets. The identity is shifting to a full-stack financial technology company. That is a huge change. So what this means is that Ripple is becoming a much more strategic, more structural project. But, and this is a big but, it's absolutely crucial to remember that this doesn't just magically erase the market risks and the crazy volatility that are part of the crypto world. That's all still there.
Ultimately, Ripple is betting the farm. They're betting their future on becoming an essential, can't-live-without-it part of the global financial system. Their ambition is crystal clear, but it all boils down to one final critical question. Will institutional adoption actually follow?
And just a quick reminder, everything here is for educational and informational purposes only. It is definitely not financial advice. You always have to do your own research before making any decisions.